Good evening and welcome to Mayo Civic Center in Rochester for the first debate of the 2014 campaign for Minnesota Governor. I'm Jay First, Managing Editor of the Post-Bulletin in Rochester, and I'll moderate tonight's debate, the first of 5 to be held around the state. Tonight's event was organized by the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities, the Rochester Area Chamber of Commerce, and by the Post-Bulletin. And it's being broadcast live around the state on public TV and well beyond, and thanks to our public TV sponsors tonight. We're joined by the 3 major party candidates tonight: DFL incumbent Governor Mark Dayton, Republican candidate and Hennepin County Commissioner Jeff Johnson, and Independence Party candidate Hannah Nicollet. Thank you for being here, and you can applaud. Okay, here are the ground rules. I'll read the question. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to respond. We have highly skilled timekeepers down in front here to keep us on track. I have the discretion to allow a 30-second rebuttal, or I can ask a follow-up if a candidate hasn't clearly answered the question or addressed the question. So it behooves the candidate to address the question. Halfway through the debate, to spice things up, we'll have a lightning round. Very quick yes or no type questions, and the candidates will keep those answers concise. Then we'll resume with 3 or 4 full-length questions, and to wrap it up, each candidate has 2 minutes to make a closing statement. So that's a lot of work to do in 1 hour. The questions were dreamed up by the debate sponsors, and the candidates have not seen them in advance. They don't know of the topics in advance. We cut cards backstage to determine who gets to respond to the first question. So again, we only have 1 hour. We have a lot we want to cover, and so we'd really appreciate it if you hold your applause until the very end. Candidates have a lot of friends here tonight, as you know, and the very best way you can help your candidate is by holding your applause to the end. So, are we ready to roll?
Yes.
Okay, first question is on Minnesota's economy and tax and spending issues. One of the governor's first tasks at the start of the term is to submit a budget for the state. A planning estimate from Minnesota Management and Budget after the last legislative session estimated a surplus of $603 million for the next biennium. Here's the question. Considering this budget estimate, what changes would you make in Minnesota's budget and tax system to enhance Minnesota's business climate? Commissioner Johnson, you won the cut, I believe, with an ace being high. So you go first, followed by Governor Dayton and Ms. Nicollet.
All right, thank you, Jay, and I just want to thank you and the hosts for putting this together tonight. I do appreciate it. I think here's where you're going to see a very fundamental difference between the governor and me as to where we would put our priorities when it comes to the economy of Minnesota. In particular, I've been told that every state that surrounds us has billboards up saying, "Open for business, come to us." We don't have those billboards in Minnesota, and unfortunately, their billboards are actually working. We just learned from the Bureau of Labor Statistics last week that over the past year, Minnesota has actually had the worst job growth rate in the Midwest and the 41st worst in the country. We also have seen that underemployment in Minnesota is at 53%, which means that half the people in this state who are working are actually overqualified and probably underpaid. And that all directly relates to our taxing and regulatory and in some cases spending policies in this state. You are going to see me working hard to reform our taxes. I have a strong belief that the tax system should be low, broad, and simple. And almost any economist will tell you that that's what you need to do. And I suspect you'll see big changes in the second biennium rather than the first because we'll only have a few weeks to make big changes. But if we have a lower tax system, a simpler tax system, a fairer tax system, we're going to be starting to encourage the growth of the good jobs that we've been losing to the states that surround us these past few years.
Thank you. Governor Dayton.
When I took office 3.5 years ago, the state was facing a projected $6.2 billion deficit for the next biennium. We owed the schools $2.8 billion, so I would say the fiscal situation of the state at that time was dire. Now we're looking at a surplus of $603 million, additional $400 million that was transferred over to the Health Care Access Fund. So really about $1 billion of cushion there, and we don't owe the schools anything. And we have eliminated most of the raids from the other accounts in state government, so we got a sound fiscal platform from which to go into the future. Now, the next 2 revenue forecasts in November and the end of February will really set the table for what we have to work with. But I don't see raising anyone's taxes. I think we made taxes less regressive in Minnesota due to the actions we took in 2013. We have the cost of government, which has been widely acclaimed in the past as the best barometer of state taxation and spending relative to the capacity of the people in the state, as one of the lowest it's been since it's been recorded. So we have spending under control. We have made new investments in education, higher education, in early childhood, in all-day kindergarten. And we have a strong, robust employment growth, 160,000 new jobs on which to build further.
Okay, thank you, Governor. Ms. Nicollet.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me. And as to that, where we're going, I agree that, so the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out with a statistic with regard to our private sector job growth. And that does concern me for our future. Our economy has grown at about 0.8% over the past year, and we need private sector job growth because that's what creates wealth. Wealth is stuff and services that people actually want. And government jobs aren't usually wealth producing. So what the first thing I'd like to do is get rid of the corporate tax. In Minnesota, it's third highest in the nation. There's nothing we can do about the fact that, like Medtronic just renounced their U.S. legal tax status. They're going to Ireland where they only have 12.5%. Well, we could compete much better if we didn't have the third highest corporate tax in the nation at 9.8%. It's also only 4% of revenue, and it's the most costly to collect. So first thing to go would be we would put a sale on our having a business in Minnesota, and I would expect that then we would actually grow revenue because historically when you make it cheaper to have a business in your state, businesses want to come to your state. So that's the first thing I would address. I would also address our burdensome regulations. We have an abundance of, for instance, if you have a wetland on your property, you want to do something with your property. You're a business, you're a residence, whatever it is, you have to go through 9 different state and local agencies, and some of them will conflict with one another. So I say we go to one standard, and the answer is yes or no.
Okay. Did a great job of observing the time cards, so we're off to a good start. Question number 2 is on local government aid, or LGA. Local government aid helps communities pay for basic services that people rely on. LGA has been successful at narrowing tax-based disparities between cities and has helped provide services without extreme property tax burdens. In 2014, cities had the 3rd lowest levy increase in 25 years due to the partial restoration of state aid lost since 2002. So here's the question. Would you make LGA a budget priority and restore the remaining $48 million to bring aid to cities back to 2002 funding levels? So Governor Dayton, it's your turn to go first, followed by Ms. Nicollet and Commissioner Johnson.
Well, I've made local government aid a priority because it's essential to providing the kind of services that people depend upon from their local governments, such as police, fire protection, social services, street plowing, and the like. And the way it's been set up in the state of Minnesota creates municipal governments and sets up the terms by which they can operate. And the way it has been established is there are 2 main sources of revenue for the local governments of Minnesota. One is the property tax, and the other is local government aid. So when you cut local government aid, as the greater Minnesota cities have noted over the last previous decade to when I arrived, there's no choice but for property taxes to be increased and for services to be cut. So we, in 13 and 14, increased local government aids, the DFL legislature and myself, and the result was, as was noted, one of the lowest increases in property tax rates in the state, in the nation, in the history of the last this century, and also gave local governments the wherewithal to go back and make some badly needed investments to upgrade their operations, their facilities, their police and fire equipment, machinery. So, local government aid will depend on the budget for the next year, which will depend on these revenue forecasts I mentioned earlier, but absolutely local government aid will continue to be a strong priority of mine.
Okay, Ms. Nicollet.
Well, I believe it's a priority in the sense that it's an issue of unfunded mandates. The state requires cities to provide services that they don't pay for. So that's been a problem for cities. They don't actually have the funds to pay for the services that they're required, like child protection, that they're required by the state to provide. So in the way that I see it, any service that the state requires a city to provide, you can't require of anything of anyone that you don't expect to pay for yourself. So I believe that if the state is requiring it of a city, then they should be willing to, we should be willing to pick up the tab for it. Then we consider it a mandatory service that the state of Minnesota provides. Whether it's Child Protective Services is simply under the, constitutional responsibilities of state government. We provide for public safety as, a constitutional responsibility, and so Child Protective Services falls under that balloon. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
There was an increase in local government aid last year under the all-DFL government that we have, but there was also the largest portion, I believe, that we've ever seen of local government aid going to Minneapolis, and that's at the direct expense of communities in greater Minnesota. And that has been a pretty common theme in the Dayton administration. Greater Minnesota, in many ways, has become an afterthought in this state. Whether you're looking at where we spend our transportation dollars, whether you're looking at K-12 education funding formulas, whether you're looking at some of the regulations that are killing our farmers and our miners and our loggers in this state, or whether you look at LGA, there's a very metro-centric philosophy at the Capitol right now. I believe in the original intent of LGA, which was to provide for communities that have a low property tax base the money to provide basic services like roads and bridges, like police and fire and emergency services, like sewer and water. But I think we've moved far, far away from that, and we're directing it now to cities that don't need that help. I've had the question, will you promise to increase local government aid? I won't make that promise, but I will promise to do everything I can to direct the money that's already in local government aid to the communities that actually need it, because that's not happening right now.
Governor Dayton, since this is a greater Minnesota-oriented debate, I'll give you 30 seconds if you want to respond to Commissioner Johnson on that point.
Well, the facts just don't support what Commissioner Johnson alleges. The bonding bill last year, 38% of it went to greater Minnesota, 28% to the metro, and the rest was statewide projects, and 10% went to the state capital project. Unemployment rates right now in Rochester are 3.3%, Mankato 3.7%. You look at the development projects downtown in both of those cities, as well as St. Cloud. The bonding bill, as I said, the focus has been very much on greater Minnesota and meeting the needs here, and that's why the economies are expanding.
Okay. Question number 3 is on MNsure, the state health insurance exchange, and MNsure was in the news today. Regional insurance rates under MNsure vary widely. They're lowest in the Twin Cities this year, and people in southeastern Minnesota face the steepest rates, plus have fewer choices. Ditto in northeastern Minnesota. The geographical disparity has been linked in part to access to dominant health, hospital and clinic systems. Now, with Preferred One dropping out, further changes are ahead in rates. So here's the question. As governor, how would you help make sure MNsure rates and plan options are equitable in all corners of the state? And Ms. Nicollet, it's your turn, followed by Commissioner Johnson and Governor Dayton.
Thank you. Well, obviously, it's going to be difficult. MNsure just had the largest enrollee Preferred One drop out of the program. So, we're now looking at, and they had the lowest rates. And of course, there have been all kinds of administrative problems, software glitches, and the whole rollout went out poorly. So we'll probably have to fix it as long as there is a federal mandate that requires that we have federal health insurance here as a state. And I don't see us handing over federal control. If we have a federal exchange, then we lose other federal subsidies, and that addresses another subject, which is how much we receive back from the federal government already. Minnesota sends $90 billion a year to the federal government, and we only receive about $45 billion back. So we receive about 50 cents on every dollar, and we have to jump through hoops to get it. So at this point, I'm not willing to give MNsure, if we don't have MNsure, then we don't even receive the subsidies that come alongside the, having our own exchange. For whatever reason, if you go with the federal exchange, you don't receive the federal subsidies. So we need to fix it regardless. We need to implement it. Now, if I learned anything as a software developer, it's that you don't reinvent the wheel. So we find software and administrative handling of an exchange that's actually working well, and we tailor it to Minnesota and implement it here. That would be my suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Well, we had the best insurance system in the country in Minnesota prior to MNsure. We don't anymore. And Governor, you desperately wanted to be the first state in the country to implement Obamacare in Minnesota in the form of MNsure, and you got everything you wanted, and it's been an unmitigated disaster, and it's hurting thousands of people. 140,000 plus Minnesotans who have been forced off their health care because of MNsure. Many of them lost their doctors. Some of them lost their hospitals. We've seen rates increase after MNsure. They're about to spike next year from what we learned today. We have the highest deductibles in the country. We have parents with babies who can't get their babies on insurance for months because this thing is such a mess. And Governor, you had a press conference today and you said that you don't lose any sleep over MNsure and we should celebrate it. I lose sleep over MNsure. Hundreds of thousands of Minnesotans are losing sleep over MNsure. So what do we do about it? Number one, I'm going to demand a Section 1332 waiver under the Affordable Care Act, which is called a state innovation waiver, at least as a starting point, so we can bring some of the things we had before that worked better back, but we can't get that till 2017. So in the short term, I can tell you right now, I will fire every member of that board and the top staff because they are incompetent. I will take away their ability to make rules without public input, and I will work very hard to remove barriers for the private sector to actually compete with MNsure. We used to be the best in the country. We're not anymore. And because of that, thousands of people are being hurt, and I think it's time we had a governor who'll do something about it.
Thank you. Governor Dayton.
The announcement today was that for the second year now in a row, Minnesota will have the lowest rates of any health exchange in the country. So we've succeeded in keeping the insurance costs relatively low. There's a 4.5% average increase. It varies from one part of the state to another. And we've brought the rate of people who are unemployed or uninsured in Minnesota down by 40%. We have the second lowest percent of people uninsured of any state in the nation. And hundreds of thousands of people have had access to health care that they didn't have before because of disqualification for pre-existing conditions, because of ceilings on the total amount of health expenditures in a lifetime, and a number of other ways in which the Affordable Care Act has opened the door for people to be able both to afford and be assured of that they're going to have quality care. Now, you can cite some statistics that are misleading. 140,000 people went with health care plans that were not ACA compliant and were required to become so. So insurers had to adjust those plans to offer them something better than what they had before. That's one of the purposes of the Affordable Care Act, is to ensure people that they're going to have coverage for their needs, which a lot of people don't find out until after it's too late. Over half the personal work bankruptcies in this country are caused by health care costs that exceed people's means, and most of those people have insurance.
Thank you. Now we'll have our lightning round of quick questions, and we're looking for straight up yes or no answers with just a sentence or two of elaboration. Recently, the state's building code was updated to mandate home indoor sprinkler systems for homes over 4,500 square feet, which will add to the cost of new homes. Do you support the new mandate, Commissioner Johnson?
Absolutely not, and this is a great example of a difference, I think, in philosophy between the governor and me, where the belief is government always knows best. I think consumers should choose whether they want to put sprinklers in their homes or not.
Okay, Governor Dayton.
Yes, I support it, and people who haven't had the experience of going into a burning building and having to risk their lives or give their lives to put out those fires are in no position to judge what the firefighters of this state say overwhelmingly is necessary for their protection and for the safety of people who live in those residences.
And Ms. Nicollet.
I don't. I believe it's the work of lobbyists to make sure that every luxury available is mandated to be put into building codes, and it is only affordable to the wealthy. If you're at a lower income, this can make a difference. I saw a stat a few years ago that every 5,000 you add on to the price of a house eliminates 35,000 people from being able to afford that house. So I support affordable housing, and I wouldn't mandate it.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson, I might give you a shot at responding to the governor's comments about firefighters, if you want to take that.
Sure, and I don't think any lobby, no matter how great the lobby is, or no matter how much we agree with the lobby, should be dictating our policy. And what it comes down to is exactly what Hannah said. Because of this new mandate, which most of the legislature, from both parties, didn't seem to like, we are now increasing the cost of homes and pricing some people out of being able to buy a home.
Okay. Number 2 in the lightning round, the state just created a $20 million fund to expand Minnesota's broadband infrastructure. Recently, the governor's broadband task force recommended an additional $200 million for the next 2 years for the infrastructure grant fund. Do you support the task force's $200 million recommendation, Governor Dayton?
Yes, it's definitely one of my priorities. That's part of the cost. So we have a task force that estimated between $800 million and $3 billion to really complete this broadband access in Minnesota. So it's a very expensive proposition, but that's a step in the right direction.
Ms. Nicollet.
Well, I support broadband access throughout rural areas, and I do think that that's a hindrance to being able to do business in rural areas. It's the same as mail service, really. Our new mail service, our new mode of communication, primary, is the internet. So, but as far as how it's being allocated right now, my concern is that I've seen right now we're at about 99% people being connected at acceptable, what the state has determined to be acceptable download speeds, and 75% at acceptable upload speeds. So we're looking at about 25% getting up to par on upload speeds. I would probably rather see, because what we've had problems with is that the government has been competing with private business. So in Monticello, we had an instance where they came in and installed cable and then started having a price war with the cable companies that were already there. I would rather have us focus our resources on areas that are not connected at all and start with those. $200 million is an awful lot of money, and it's highly important, but we're also on the cusp of new technology too that may not involve laying cable at all. So we're looking at satellite and whatnot. So I would just be hesitant to go full bore ahead. But public buildings, we have we want to make sure that all of our schools are hooked up and that they can be hot spots, and make sure that all of our areas that are currently not covered right now are covered.
Okay, so that was a few lines more than I was expecting, but I do want to ask,
Sorry.
So would you support the task force's $200 million recommendation?
So I provided that it's allocated to areas that are not already connected.
Okay. Commissioner Johnson.
Jay, I don't know if I would support that exact number. I don't know where I'd end up. I can tell you that broadband connectivity will be a priority for me, because I'm a strong believer that if we actually want to be competitive from a business standpoint, every area of the state has to be connected. I would agree with Hannah that I'm not a big fan of the government entering the private market as a competitor, but if we can use this money to incent the private sector, I'd be very supportive of that.
Okay. Question number 3, do you support development of high-speed passenger rail between Rochester and the Twin Cities, the project called Zip Rail? That's an issue that a lot of people around here care about. So we're going with Ms. Nicollet first this time.
So at this point, I'm more concerned. We have a lot of, the rail that I'm most concerned about right now is we have farmers with grain that's sitting on rail and not able to move, and it's at a crisis situation. So I would like to see that rail issue addressed. And we also have a roads crisis. I mean, we're looking at $7 to $9 billion. Half of our roads are over 50 years old and in need of repair, and we have 1,000 bridges. So we keep dropping billions on people rail, and even though I've got nothing against it, my concern is that we're not focusing on our needs and instead focusing more on our wants. So we need to refocus our priorities. We need those roads and bridges. It's having good roads and bridges is essential to your economy, and so that's where I would focus the effort right now. And coming up with $7 to $9 billion, we've come up with $4 billion for Viking stadiums and several lines of rail already. So I believe that we can easily find the $7 to $9 billion that we need, it's actually setting us back. It costs every Minnesotan money not to take care of that. So that would be my primary concern. And I'm less concerned with rail projects. I feel like those should be secondary to any, to our roads and bridges, that we address those first.
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Show me the cost-benefit analysis, and I'll take a look at it. I've not been a big fan of rail projects in general because I think they're a terribly inefficient use of transportation dollars, but I've been told by some advocates for the zip rail that this one's going to pay for itself. I'm skeptical, but my ears are open. If somebody can prove that to me, then I'll certainly consider it.
Okay, Governor Dayton.
I'd agree with Commissioner Johnson. It needs to go through a careful cost-benefit analysis. It also has to be viewed in conjunction with the Destination Medical Center here in Rochester, which I strongly supported, and the state of Minnesota is backed, and as a result, this area is going to be transformed. The Mayo's private sector employment may as much as double over the next 10, 20 years. It's going to be a phenomenal impact on our state, on the medical technology industry, and Minnesota, between the University of Minnesota and Mayo, has the opportunity to become a magnet for that kind of growth of jobs and opportunities, and the zip rail line would certainly enhance that connection.
Okay, so a few more lightning round questions, and the more concise answers, the better. The most recent proposed amendments to the Minnesota Constitution were highly controversial. Currently, only a simple majority of the legislature is required to put a proposed constitutional amendment on the ballot. Should this threshold be raised to ensure more consensus when proposing changes to the Constitution? And Commissioner Johnson, you're first.
No, I don't think it should. I think the system we have is workable, and I think it's proven to have worked in the past.
Okay, Governor Dayton?
No.
That's a very concise answer.
I'll elaborate if you like.
No,
Give
that's
me another
good.
2 minutes.
No, I appreciate that. Ms. Nicollet?
No, I guess we're all succinct.
Okay. Last one in the quick round here. Should liquor sales be permitted on Sundays? Governor Dayton?
My great-grandfather would turn over in his grave if he knew that I was for selling anything on Sundays, but I don't think that you should distinguish liquor and automobiles from other commodities that people want to buy, and if they want to shop on Sunday, more and more of our population has a day of faith not on Sunday, so it gets hard to isolate one day and say, you can do this, you can't do that.
Okay. Ms. Nicollet?
Yeah, well, any legal product should be able to be sold on any day. We have, Sunday is a religious holiday for Christians. Saturday, Friday night sundown to Saturday night sundown is a Sabbath for Jewish people. So why did we pick Sunday in particular? It seems unfair to other faiths, but regardless, any legal product should be able to be sold any day of the week. And if you're a business owner and you want to close on Sunday, more power to you. Go ahead. But yeah, we wouldn't. I wouldn't support that. And I'm also against the fact that 60% of Minnesotans want Sunday alcohol sales. So why shouldn't they have it?
Okay, Commissioner Johnson.
Yes, and this is frustrating to me because everybody says let's do it, but the last 2 years there's been a big push, and under all DFL control, we can't get it done for some reason. So we'll get it done if I'm governor.
Okay. All right, after that brisk little exercise, we'll now go back to long-form questions, and you'll have a luxurious 90 seconds to answer. This one's about Destination Medical Center, which is topic A in Rochester. Destination Medical Center is a new approach for public-private partnerships. The plan calls for a specific local investment to occur before approved state funding is released. The goal is the combination of efforts that will drive regional economic growth that will provide a boost for much of the state. Some have suggested the plan could serve as a model for targeted economic development efforts in other parts of the state. So here's the question. Do you agree with how DMC was structured as a way to promote regional development? And would you support similar public-private partnerships elsewhere? And if so, do you have some in mind? So, Ms. Nicollet, you're up first, followed by Commissioner Johnson and Governor Dayton.
Well, as far as the plan, I believe it's already been put in place, and it's just a multiplier. The Destination Medical Center, the help from the state has already been promised, and we should keep our promises. But what I saw as the larger issue with regard to the Destination Medical Center and the problem with the multiplier is that our Attorney General and our Governor's office aren't even in communication right now, which I don't know if you've seen our as the Independence Party, we've been working as a team. So all 5 of us, all 5 state office candidates, pulled together. We are, working on issues together. We put our ad together as a team, and we believe in. That's what I believe in, is being a team player. That's part of what I see the role of governor as, is finding talent and tasking issues. And so that's what I would like to see us do, is tackle everything as a team. The fact that the Attorney General and Governor aren't even in communication right now is really concerning to me. I would like to see us working together as a state to improve the whole state.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Well, I believe that DMC is very good for Rochester and it's very good for Minnesota. And I believe that the government does have a role to play in public-private partnerships when it comes to infrastructure upgrades and paying for things like roads and bridges. I would have had a difference of opinion on the definition of infrastructure. I've been very clear on that with respect to this bill. Had I been a legislator and not able to change it, I likely wouldn't have supported it. If I had been governor, however, because I recognize the importance of it, I would have sat down with the authors and figured out how to work that difference out. So I think it is something that is important. As Hannah mentioned, it's likely going to have to come up again next year because we've apparently had another misunderstanding of what was in a bill from the governor's office, and there's a disagreement with the Attorney General's office, and it's going to have to be fixed next year. Some people have said it's an easy fix. There's never an easy fix of anything when you reopen something controversial. It'll probably be difficult, but I will work to get it done as governor.
Very good. Thank you. Governor Dayton.
Well, it wouldn't need to be fixed if it weren't existing at all. And that would be the situation if when the Mayo Clinic executives came and said, we have this vision for the future of Rochester and really for the state of Minnesota in terms of medical care and medical technology, if I as governor and the legislative leaders, and it was bipartisan. The representation here in Rochester is bipartisan, and if we hadn't stepped forward and said right away, yes, with enthusiastic, we're on board, we're with you, we want to partner with the city, the county, and with you, Mayo, and the private donations you're going to raise, then you wouldn't have anything to fix. So in this case, we'll get this matter resolved at the beginning of the next legislative session. It's not a difficult matter, and we'll proceed. This is a phenomenal project for Rochester, phenomenal for the state of Minnesota for reasons I described before. And should it be a model for other investments of that type, other partnerships? Absolutely. And this is one of the areas where there is principal disagreement. I believe there is a role for government to provide incentives and then to partner with the private sector in order to make these projects happen. I mean, you can look at AGCO in Jackson, Minnesota. You can look at Segedus up on the range. You can look at Shutterfly and Shakopee. All over the state, there have been projects that we've moved forward because we made the investments along with smaller in scale relative to the DMC, but the same kind of seeding that's been crucial to get the projects going and expanding.
Commissioner Johnson, to back up for a moment, so do you think this model works, and can you envision it being used in other parts of the state with particular projects?
I could see it being used in other parts of the state as long as the definition of infrastructure is truly about infrastructure, roads in particular. So there'd probably be some negotiation with respect to that if I were governor.
Okay. And Ms. Nicollet, I'd ask you too.
I would agree that when we provide what we've promised to provide as a state for new infrastructure, we provide roads, we provide sewage, all that, then it's absolutely effective, and broadband may be an issue with that also, but yeah, it's provided that we're providing transportation and infrastructure.
Okay, that leads nicely into the next question, which is on transportation. Minnesota faces transportation funding challenges at every level. By one estimate, state highway funding will fall $12 billion short of what's needed over the next 20 years. Last year, the Corridors of Commerce program was created to help remove bottlenecks and increase capacity on key highways. Over 120 projects were submitted for initial funding, of which 10 received funding. Also, a task force of 20 mayors from smaller cities are working to develop programs and plans to fund local municipal road improvements. So here's the question. What is your vision for investing in Minnesota's transportation system, including local roads in communities large and small, as well as the Corridors of Commerce program, and how would this vision be funded? Kind of a big baggy question. Commissioner Johnson, you get the first crack at this, followed by Governor Dayton and Ms. Nicollet.
Well, first of all, I would support the corridors, will support the Corridors of Commerce program. I happen to believe we don't spend enough money on roads. That might be the only area of government where I'm willing to say that. But the problem has become that, especially in the last couple of years, all of the energy, all of the focus in transportation is on everything but roads and bridges. It's on light rail, it's on commuter rail, it's on trolleys and streetcars and bike paths and sidewalks and complete streets, which I have come to learn means everything but the street. And that is exactly backwards, because we all rely upon roads and bridges by far more than anything else. Even if you don't drive a car, you rely upon roads and bridges to get the goods to your grocery store that you can buy, or to get the fire truck to your house if you have a fire. So my focus is going to be heavily on roads and bridges, and yes, we do have a funding problem with that. The gas tax all by itself is not going to cover what we need to do, but part of that is about priorities. It's about actually saying we're going to put this up at the top, and rather than spending on all these other things ahead of it, we're going to say this is where we're going to spend first, and then worry about some of these other things later. I'm also someone who would be willing to support much more significant bonding when it comes to transportation projects. That might require a constitutional change to do, but I would be willing to push that forward. We've got to start focusing on roads and bridges over all these other forms of transportation.
Thank you. Governor Dayton.
Well, I would agree again with Commissioner Johnston about the need to increase expenditures and increasing the bonding capacity. Right now, Minnesota Department of Transportation pays up to 20% of its revenues for the bonds that's already issued. So it is at capacity, and that is definitely something that needs to be addressed in the next legislative session. There's about a $6 billion gap, $20 billion, you said, Jay, over 20 years, $6 billion over the next 10 years between what we need to spend just to keep the system as it is now, but maintain the status quo, which, as we all know, has deteriorated over the last couple of decades. Greater congestion, deterioration of the trunk highway system, more accidents, more fatalities. So next session, we're going to have to face up to, are we going to come up with additional money that's necessary to make those investments to at least break even and ideally to improve our system. Some people say, well, we'll just get administrative efficiencies out of the Department of Transportation, which is a very important aspect of it, but it's not going to come close to the amount of additional expenditure necessary. So the people of Minnesota really have to decide through their elected representatives, are they satisfied with things as they are? Are they willing to pay additional money from some source or another in order to be able to make that break even? Or do we want to improve things, in which the case you're going to have to invest more? Or are we willing to let things continue to deteriorate, which will happen unless the investments overall are increased?
Commissioner Johnson, before we move on to Ms. Nicollet, do you want to respond to that?
Well, yeah, when I say we need to actually prioritize, my answer was not that we need to just find efficiencies, although I agree with the governor that we need to do that. But the problem is we haven't made this a priority, particularly the last 2 years. If you look at the bonding bill, I love to talk about the Senate Legislative Office building. We're spending more on that than what we spent on roads and bridges in the $1 billion bonding bill. So the priorities have not been there, and we need to actually put this at the top of the list. It's the only way we're going to get it done.
Okay. Thanks for your patience, Ms. Nicollet. On to you.
Okay. And this is, under the Constitution, transportation, one of the responsibilities of government, and we haven't been doing it. And it is truly a public good, because not taking care of our roads and bridges costs every Minnesotan money, whether it's extra transportation costs, whether you use the roads or not, because you end up paying for it either directly or indirectly, or via emergency services. Regardless, the return on investment for every dollar that you put towards, just on a cost benefit basis, every dollar you put towards roads and bridges comes back to you $3 to $4 each. And so, versus light rail, where you get about 42 cents on every dollar. So the cost benefit is not something that benefits all of Minnesota. Plus, it is another instance where the Twin Cities ends up, getting the lion's share. So, as far as how our priorities have been, we need to, move those. Somehow we managed to find, about $4 billion on, Viking Stadium and, light rail, all of those things. things that we've been throwing money at, and meanwhile, we've been neglecting our roads and bridges for a long time. I've never seen anything like this, and I've spent my entire life here. I'm 40, so it's, I've been here quite a while, and I would like to see us, however we get it done, we need to make it a priority. So first of all, we need to reprioritize. We got to stop buying toys when we need food as a state, and then after that, if we need to raise gas tax, by a certain number of cents to make it happen, we need to make it happen.
Thank you. Next question is on the workforce and jobs in Minnesota. According to Minnesota's Department of Employment and Economic Development, job creation across the state has been uneven since 2010, with all regions of greater Minnesota lagging behind the metro area. Employers across greater Minnesota, including here in Rochester, say it's extremely tough to find qualified employees for many types of jobs. And as DMC evolves, certainly with 35,000 more jobs projected in this area, there's a lot of concern about whether people will be here who are trained and ready to step into those jobs. So here's the question. An employer-focused job training program that put an emphasis on job training solutions was introduced in the legislature last year. As governor, would you support this $10 million program? And in what other ways would you address the worker shortage and the shortage of trained workers in greater Minnesota? Big question, but if you can do your best. Governor Dayton, you're first, followed by Ms. Nicollet and Commissioner Johnson.
Well, Jay, your preamble has its own contradiction. On the one hand, you say that economic growth is not occurring around the state, and then you cite the fact that we don't have enough workers for the jobs, and we don't have enough housing for the workers. There are businesses all over the state in greater Minnesota that want to expand and create more jobs and can't because of barriers such as the lack of housing. DigiKey up in Thief River Falls and Polaris and Rosso looking for assistance to increase the housing for people that they want to hire. Down on the Iowa border, Jackson, right through to Laverne and Worthington can't expand because of water deficiencies, which the bonding bill is focused on correcting. So, I dispute that we don't have good, healthy economic growth going on all over Minnesota, and not uniformly common, but very much the same, kind of moving forward. So, yes, we need to train people for the jobs. I was up on the range this last week, and they're looking for welders and engineers and technicians in order to expand. Yes, absolutely, we need to realign the training programs, starting with high schools and even junior high schools, and get them aligned with the MNSCU campuses and train young people for the jobs of the future rather than the jobs of the past. That's going to require an investment, again, to bring up modern technology and equipment to those facilities, but the payoff is significant and one we should pursue.
So you would support the $10 million program?
I mean, yes. We're not. The federal government has myriad job training programs. The state has its own on top of that. I'm not sure that there's a lack of funds right now. So in that respect, the lack of funding is for particularly the MNSCU campuses, for the equipment, the technology, the building improvements that are necessary, so that the training that does go on is training people for the state-of-the-art jobs that are out there.
Thank you. Ms. Nicollet.
Would you repeat the question with regard to the program, the $10 million program?
I'm sorry.
Would you repeat the question with regard to the $10 million program that you referenced?
There was a program that was introduced at the legislature last year, $10 million that would be used for job training solutions. And so more generally, what would you do to generate more training programs for workers?
Okay. Well, as far as, and then you also mentioned economic development and part of that question in the rural areas. And so economic development, the first thing, and as I said, I'd like to get rid of the corporate tax, and I believe that would start more businesses in rural areas as well as in the Twin Cities. That's, going to affect all areas of the state equally. It also, we do need to get all areas of the state connected to the internet. That's another area where rural areas are deficient. Education is also an area. We need to address the achievement gap. We have schools that have some major problems that we haven't addressed, and once again, that's we could look at. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are areas of the country that are having tremendous success, and we could implement what they have done, provided that we're willing to innovate. We have to be willing to, really make the changes here as a state and not, be student-focused in our policies. So we attack education, we go after, the business taxes that have been prohibitive, get rid of those, and I believe that we would start flourishing. And of course, then as a state, we provide for good infrastructure. So all of that provided in the rural areas, their connection, education, and we would see an economic growth in the rural areas without a doubt.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson.
Well, let me first just mention that when the governor said that economic growth is going gangbusters in Minnesota, it's not. And we just learned that last week from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is part of the Obama administration. And they told us that we are the worst in the Midwest over the last year in job growth rate. The Kauffman Foundation, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan group, shows that if you look at the last 4 years, Minnesota has created the fewest number of new businesses in the country per capita. So it's not just a greater Minnesota issue, it's an issue all over the state. But it is particularly problematic in greater Minnesota, and part of that is because we haven't paid a lot of attention to greater Minnesota these last few years. And so, number one is infrastructure. Let's fund roads in greater Minnesota, and let's work to expand broadband. I think that's a very important piece. Another piece is just economic development in general and having a governor who's willing to be a cheerleader for greater Minnesota. I was born and raised in Detroit Lakes. My wife's from Crookston. We went to school in Moorhead. Our roots, our values, our families are all in greater Minnesota, and I think I'm somebody who will be out here a lot cheerleading for greater Minnesota. And then finally, and here's a big difference between the governor and me, we have some opportunities around this state to create great jobs. One of them is mining up in northern Minnesota. Those are literally hundreds of really good paying jobs up there. They are desperate for those jobs up on the range, and we're kind of slow walking that process. I don't think PolyMet will open if the governor is reelected. I will do everything I can to get it opened if I'm governor.
Well, Governor, I should give you 30 seconds to respond to the last part of that comment.
The commissioner has decided before the review process is complete that he's already jumped on one side. He's all for PolyMet, which may be the final outcome and the proper one, but to jump in at this point where the review process and the environmental impact statement is fairly close to completion. It's taken too long, no doubt, but to jump in now and throw in a whole hog and just say, well, we'll forget about all the environmental considerations and everything else, so we're just going to pander to northern Minnesota to try to get their jobs, I think is really irresponsible.
I'll let the other two candidates respond as well, since mining is now the topic. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Well, yeah, Governor, I didn't say that we should just ignore the regulatory process. We've been through 7 years of the regulatory process. They've spent hundreds of millions of dollars, and what we've seen is that they likely can do this in an environmentally friendly way, which is really important. I don't even think we should make the review process easier, but I think let's at least push through it to make sure it actually happens in a timely and fair way. I think we're dragging this out so that we can say after the election, we're not going to open this thing.
Okay, Ms. Nicollet?
With regard to PolyMet, are we?
Regarding mining in northeastern
Regarding
Minnesota.
mining, yeah. Well, the last environmental impact study gave it a rating on par with the Green Line, and so, so we're at a point where we could go ahead. My only concern is that we've had some instances where, mines have declared bankruptcy after the fact because there are a lot of costs involved on the latter end. It takes about $200 million to close the mine, $6 to $7 million after. Provided that money is set aside and we know that it's available and it's not going to be abandoned, then absolutely we need it for economic growth up there.
Okay, thank you. That's it for questions, long form questions. Now each candidate gets 2 minutes for a closing statement. Again, we cut cards to determine who goes first. The cards are still right here, in fact, and we have a little time for Texas Hold'em later, perhaps, if anyone's interested. Hannah Nicollet won the cut and goes first with the closing statement, followed by Commissioner Johnson and Governor Dayton.
All right. Well, I want to really thank the debate moderators and the people who held this debate for having me. I appreciate that because this is the only debate that I have been confirmed to participate in. So I sincerely thank you for that. And I also want to make why I should probably introduce myself. I'm a mom of 2 kids. My 3-year-old and 7-year-old are over here. My husband is over here, and I'm a former software developer. And people probably wonder, what in the world does that have to do with being governor? Well, I love to solve problems, and just personally, I love to build teams. So my lieutenant governor candidate is by far the best. I encourage you to look into him. He wrote the book Eco-Commerce 101, where he presented a new model for developing ag and environmental policy. Why does that matter? Because I believe in team building. That's why we're all working, from the Independence Party, we're all working as a team together, and that's how we would like to solve problems as a state. So, why Minnesota? I love my state, and I would love to. This is absolutely my dream job. I would rather be governor of Minnesota than president of the United States. And as such, I think that we can work together much better than with the special interests. I believe the Independence Party needs a voice in Minnesota because we represent the people. We truly do. You know, when 68% of the people said that they wanted the Viking Stadium entirely privately funded, what about entirely privately funded do legislators not understand? And when they can't get it passed via a referendum, then they have backroom deals. And when they had, if they were, if you have more than 4 people in a meeting, then you're subject to open meeting laws. So they only had 4 people in a meeting. And when the press came to ask what they were doing, they said they were talking about fishing regulations, all to give us what we didn't want. And so if you shouldn't need a high-paid lobbyist, whether you're a child and you need child protection, you're being abused, you shouldn't need a high-paid lobbyist to represent you at the Capitol. In my administration, you wouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay, we can do that after closing statements here if you want to do that. Commissioner Johnson, you're next.
All right, well, thank you, Jay, and thank you again to the hosts and for all of you for being here. And I have to admit, I am really pleased that we're finally having this first debate, because I'll be honest with you, it's been a little frustrating the last couple months to watch some of the mistruths, some of the lies, Governor, that you and some of your supporters have had on TV about me for the last couple months, whether it is that I'll cut the minimum wage, I've never said that, whether that I cut education funding, I never did. In fact, I voted 3 times in each of the budgets to increase education funding. So it's nice to be here and actually share our visions directly to people and let them choose on their own. And let me tell you what my vision is, because I'm sharing it all over the state of Minnesota. It's a vision of a state where every kid in this state has access to a great education and to great teachers, regardless of where that kid lives or how rich or poor his or her parents are, and where patients and doctors are making healthcare decisions, not insurance companies, certainly not government bureaucrats. It's a state where politicians understand that we in the middle class work really, really hard for our money, and they spend it as carefully as though it's coming out of their own pockets. We're certainly not seeing that right now. It's a state where entrepreneurs actually want to start a business in Minnesota, and where our existing businesses actually want to expand here, and where every Minnesotan who's willing to work hard and follow the rules has access to a good-paying, full-time job. And most importantly, I have a vision of a state where we have ended this bitterness and envy over income differences, and this belief that the poor are poor and the rich are rich, and all we can do is just move around the money. And instead, we're celebrating people who are successful. And we are never, ever, ever giving up on people who are poor. And we are preaching every single day a sincerely held belief that the poor can become the middle class, and the middle class can become rich. And anyone who starts with nothing can still achieve anything in this state. That's my vision for Minnesota, and that's why I'm running for governor. Thank you for being here, and I'd love your support.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. Governor Dayton.
I just say parenthetically, Ms. Nicollet, I think you should, I don't decide who's in the debates, but I think you should be in the other debates. I think it's well established that the Independence Party is one of the major parties in the state, and Mr. Horner participated on all of our debates 4 years ago, and I think you should be afforded the same opportunity. Going back to the question at hand, I was born and raised in Minnesota, and obviously the state's been very, very good to my family and to myself. I started running for governor in 2009 because I was convinced the state was headed in the wrong direction. And we had, even in the midst of a national recession, the economic slump in Minnesota was greater than most other states. The tax system was regressive, and there was not generating enough revenues to meet the needs of our public education system from early childhood all the way through higher education. When I came in January of 2011, we were in a fiscal mess, looking at $6 billion budget deficit for the next 2 years. We owed our schools $2.8 billion, along with the Republican majority in the Minnesota legislature. And myself, we cut $2 billion of spending, permanent cuts in the state expenditures, and we paid off the school debts over time. We raised taxes only on the wealthiest 2% income taxes. And in fact, 2 million Minnesota middle-income taxpayers received an income tax cut in the last legislative session when we went through federal conformity. We invested that money in education, which in Minnesota had been slacking relative to other states and relative to the needs. We instituted early childhood education, all-day kindergarten, which are two of the most critical ways we can address the disparity gap and the achievement gap and the ability of schools and the society to help young people from the very birth all the way until they can enter the society as productive adults and citizens. That's the vision I have for the future of the state, and that's the one I wish to continue as governor.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Governor. We're done, and we did a great job. We wrapped up before the satellite moved on, so I appreciate the audience control. On behalf of the debate sponsors, we appreciate your efforts. We wish you the best as the campaign goes forward. We like to think this is going to be the best of the 5 debates. Best wishes for an informative and respectful campaign. And to the audience and viewers, Election Day is November 4th, but you can already vote right now. However you choose to do it, make your voice heard. Thank you. Good night.